Picture this. You're scrolling through property listings, watching studio apartments in Sydney go for $1 million, and then you see it. Free land. Not a typo, not a scam. Actual dirt with your name on it, handed over by Australian councils so desperate for warm bodies they've resorted to begging. But here's the catch nobody mentions. That free land comes with 45-degree summers that melt your will to live, isolation so profound you'll start naming the local wildlife, and flies. Oh, the flies. So relentless they'll attend your funeral just to make sure you're really gone. This isn't monopoly. This is survival real estate. Some of these towns are hidden gems. Others are gorgeous hellscapes where your closest neighbor is a 3-hour drive and a feral camel. We're counting down 10 Australian towns, practically giving away land right now. And number 1, it's so remote, so unhinged, you'll wonder if it's even on a map. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get lost together. Number 10. Ceduna, South Australia. Welcome to the edge of the Nullarbor Plain. A place where the land is flat, the ocean is turquoise, and the word remote takes on a whole new meaning. Ceduna sits on the far west coast of South Australia, about 800 kilometers from Adelaide, which means you're closer to Perth than civilization as you know it. The local council has been rolling out land incentives for years, offering residential blocks at prices so low they make you suspicious. We're talking plots for under $30,000, sometimes even cheaper if you commit to building within 2 years. The catch? You're moving to a town of 3,500 people where the nearest Bunnings is a 9-hour round trip. Let's talk about what Ceduna actually is. It's a fishing town, a gateway to the Nullarbor, a place where the main street has a bakery that's genuinely excellent, a handful of pubs, and not much else. The landscape is stunning in that brutal Australian way. Endless sky, red dirt meeting impossibly blue water, and sunsets that look like the planet is on fire. Summer temperatures regularly hit 40 degrees, and the flies, they're not just bad, they're legendary. We're talking clouds of them, dive-bombing your face like tiny kamikaze pilots with a personal vendetta. The economy runs on fishing, agriculture, and tourism. People passing through on their way across the Nullarbor stop here for fuel, food, and proof of life. If you're not in one of those industries or working remotely, employment options are thin. The upside? Housing is absurdly affordable. The downside? You're 8 hours from Adelaide, which means every specialist appointment, every IKEA run, every concert or event becomes a multi-day expedition. But here's what nobody tells you. Ceduna has a certain magic to it, the kind of place where you can spearfish in the morning, watch whales migrate in the afternoon, and see the Milky Way so clearly at night it looks fake. The community is tight-knit, sometimes too tight-knit, where everyone knows your business before you do, but there's genuine camaraderie here. You're not just moving to a town, you're joining a club of people who've chosen isolation over convenience. The council wants families, tradies, healthcare workers, anyone willing to build a life at the end of the road. They'll give you cheap land, low barriers to entry, and the kind of silence that city people romanticize until they actually experience it. Picture this. You're standing on the Ceduna jetty at dawn, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the Great Australian Bight. The air smells like salt and eucalyptus. A dolphin breaches 50 meters out. You're alone, completely, utterly alone. And for the first time in years, you're not checking your phone. And if you think Ceduna's isolated, wait until you see number 9. Number 9. Cobar, New South Wales. Deep in the red heart of western New South Wales, about 700 kilometers from Sydney, sits Cobar, a mining town that's seen boom and bust cycles like a bad relationship. The council here isn't just offering cheap land, they're begging you to take it. Residential blocks go for as little as $20,000, and if you're willing to commit to building a home within 18 months, they'll slash that price even further. Some incentives include rebates on council rates and assistance with utilities connection. Sounds generous, right? It is, because Cobar knows something you don't yet. Living here is a lifestyle choice that requires a specific kind of madness. Cobar exists because of mining. Copper, gold, zinc. This town has been pulling treasure from the earth since the 1870s. The mines are still operational, which means if you're a tradie, an engineer, or work in any mining-adjacent field, you'll find work. Good work. The kind that pays well because they have to pay well to convince people to live here. But if mining isn't your thing, you're looking at limited options: retail, hospitality, healthcare, or successfully pitching yourself as a remote worker who thrives on isolation and questionable internet speeds. Let's talk about the environment. Cobar is hot. Not, oh, it's a bit warm hot. We're talking 45-degree summers where the air shimmers, the ground cracks, and you genuinely consider whether humans were meant to survive in this climate. Winters are surprisingly cold, dropping to near freezing at night, which means you get the worst of both worlds. The landscape is stunning in that sparse, unforgiving way. Red dirt, low scrub, wide open skies that make you feel microscopic. There's a certain poetry to it, if poetry can include dust storms that turn day into apocalyptic twilight. The town itself has about 4,000 people. There's a main street with the essentials: supermarket, chemist, a few cafes, several pubs, always several pubs in mining towns, and a surprising number of heritage buildings that give Cobar more character than you'd expect. The social scene revolves around sports clubs, the pub, and community events that everyone attends because there's literally nothing else to do. It's the kind of place where you either embrace the community vibe or slowly go mad from boredom. But here's the truth: Cobar works for certain people. If you want affordable property, stable mining work, and a community where people actually know their neighbors, it delivers. The stars at night are otherworldly. The silence is profound. You're 3 hours from Dubbo, which means civilization requires commitment, but you're also free from traffic, noise, and the crushing anonymity of city life. Picture this: you're sitting on your front veranda at dusk, beers sweating in your hand, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to black. A wedge-tailed eagle circles overhead. Your nearest neighbor waves from 200 meters away. You can hear absolutely nothing except the wind and your own thoughts. It's either paradise or purgatory, depending on who you are. And if you think Cobar tests your limits, just wait for number 8. Number 8. Port Augusta, South Australia. Port Augusta calls itself the crossroads of Australia, which is marketing speak for people stop here on their way to somewhere better. Sitting at the top of Spencer Gulf, about 300 kilometers north of Adelaide, Port Augusta is where the highway splits, west to Perth, north to Darwin, east to Sydney. It's a strategic location that should mean prosperity, but instead, it's become a town desperately trying to reinvent itself after the coal-fired power station shut down in 2016, taking hundreds of jobs with it. The council is now offering land packages that border on aggressive charity, residential blocks starting at $15,000, with some deals including free land if you build within a year. They're not subtle. They need people, badly. Port Augusta has about 14,000 residents, which makes it feel like a proper town compared to the previous entries. There's a hospital, schools, a shopping center, even a cinema. But peel back the veneer and you'll find a community still reeling from economic collapse. The power station closure gutted the town's identity. Jobs evaporated, families left. What remains is a place trying to pivot to renewable energy, tourism, and agriculture, but the transition has been rough. Unemployment sits higher than the national average, and unless you're in healthcare, government work, or can successfully remote work, finding employment is a legitimate challenge. Let's discuss the geography. Port Augusta sits in a brutal climate zone. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees, making it one of the hottest towns in Australia. The heat is oppressive, the kind that radiates off the ground in waves and makes you understand why early settlers questioned their life choices. The landscape is stark: red dirt, salt bush, the occasional gum tree looking like it's barely hanging on. The southern end of the Flinders Ranges looms in the distance, offering stunning scenery if you're willing to drive. The Gulf itself is beautiful. Tidal flats, bird life, sunsets that paint the sky in colors you didn't know existed. But here's what nobody mentions in the tourism brochures. Port Augusta has a reputation. Crime rates are higher than state averages. Social issues are visible. It's the kind of town where locals will tell you which streets to avoid, where substance abuse and poverty are real, tangible problems that councils can't marketing campaign away. The community is divided. Long-term residents who remember better days, transient workers passing through, and indigenous communities dealing with systemic disadvantages. Yet, for all its struggles, Port Augusta has potential. The land is cheap, the bones of infrastructure exist. If you're someone who sees opportunity and challenge, who can work remotely or create your own employment, there's space here, literally and metaphorically. The sunrises over the Gulf are spectacular. The proximity to the Flinders Ranges offers weekend adventure. You're only 3 hours from Adelaide, which means civilization is accessible even if you rarely visit. Picture this. You're driving north out of Port Augusta at sunset, the Flinders Ranges turning purple in the distance. Behind you, the town spreads out like a dusty promise, half empty, half hopeful. A flock of galahs explodes from a tree in a burst of pink and gray. The highway stretches ahead, endless and empty. You're either escaping or arriving. Out here, it's hard to tell the difference. And if Port Augusta's struggles make you nervous, number 7 will make you reconsider what community actually means.
Number 7. Quilpie, Queensland. Welcome to the middle of absolutely nowhere. Quilpie sits in outback Queensland, roughly 1,000 kilometers west of Brisbane, a distance that stops being a number and starts being an ordeal. This is cattle country, opal mining territory, and the kind of place where the population of 595 people feels optimistic because half of them might be passing through. The Quilpie Shire Council has launched land incentive schemes that sound like fever dreams, free residential blocks for people willing to build, business incentive packages, and grants that essentially beg you to please just consider living here. They're not offering cheap land, they're offering free land, because at this point, they'll take anyone with a pulse and a building permit. Let's establish what Quilpie actually is. It's a service town for surrounding cattle stations and opal fields. The main street has a pub, a general store, a mechanic, and a bakery that locals swear by. There's a hospital with limited services, a school that fights to keep its doors open, and an airport with flights to Brisbane twice a week, if the weather cooperates. The economy runs on cattle, opal mining, and government services. If you're not a ringer, a miner, a nurse, or a teacher, your employment prospects are essentially start your own business or work remotely. And the internet out here is satellite-based, which means video calls are laggy adventures in patience. The environment is harsh. Summer temperatures soar past 45 degrees regularly. The landscape is red dirt, Mitchell grass, and endless sky. Beautiful in that this could kill you way that defines the Australian outback. Dust storms roll through like biblical plagues, coating everything in fine red powder that gets into places you didn't know existed. The wet season, when it actually happens, can flood roads and cut the town off for days or weeks. You're not just isolated, you're strategically vulnerable to weather patterns that don't care about your plans. But here's the thing about Quilpie. It has character. The people here are genuinely welcoming because they understand that survival requires community. Everyone knows everyone, which means privacy is a foreign concept, but it also means if your car breaks down 50 kilometers out of town, someone will come get you. The town has invested in quirky tourism. There's an aquatic center powered entirely by bore water, a drive-in theater under the stars, and an annual Opals Festival that brings a brief rush of visitors. The night sky is extraordinary. No light pollution, just the Milky Way stretched across the darkness like a cosmic highway. Quilpie works if you're genuinely okay with profound isolation, if you're self-sufficient, and if you can find meaning in simplicity. The land is free, but you'll pay in other ways.
distance from services, extreme weather, and the kind of solitude that either heals you or breaks you. Picture this. You're standing in your yard at midnight, no lights for kilometers in any direction. The sky is so thick with stars you can see your shadow. A dingo howls somewhere in the distance. You're holding a cold beer that costs $10 because everything costs more when it has to travel 1,000 kilometers. And somehow, impossibly, you feel more connected to the universe than you ever did in the city. And if Quilpie's isolation makes your palms sweat, number 6 is about to test every assumption you have about livable.
Number 6. Whyalla, South Australia. Whyalla is South Australia's industrial heartbeat, or at least it was. This coastal city of about 22,000 people sits on the Spencer Gulf, roughly 400 kilometers northwest of Adelaide, and it's been hemorrhaging residents since the steel industry started its slow, painful decline. The council has responded with land deals that sound increasingly desperate, residential blocks for as low as $10,000, sometimes even free if you commit to building within strict timelines. They've thrown in building grants, rate rebates, and basically every financial incentive short of paying you to show up. Because Whyalla knows what happens when a one-industry town loses that industry. It becomes a ghost town with streetlights. Let's talk about what Whyalla actually offers. It's a real city compared to the previous entries. There's a hospital, multiple schools, a university campus, shopping centers, and actual infrastructure. The coastline is genuinely beautiful. Turquoise water, rocky beaches, and some of the best cuttlefish diving in the world during breeding season. You've got the Flinders Ranges a short drive away for weekend adventures. On paper, this sounds like a bargain. Coastal living with city amenities at outback prices. But here's the brutal reality. Whyalla's economy is in crisis. The steelworks, once the town's lifeblood, employing thousands, has downsized repeatedly. Unemployment sits significantly above national averages. Unless you're in healthcare, education, mining services, or can work remotely, finding employment is genuinely difficult. The environment here is punishing. Summer temperatures regularly hit 42+ degrees, and the dry heat makes you feel like you're living inside an oven. The wind, comes off the Gulf and tears through town, carrying dust, salt, and the constant reminder that nature doesn't care about your comfort. Winters are mild, which sounds nice until you realize that mild in Whyalla still means dealing with infrastructure designed for a climate it no longer has. Water restrictions are common. The red dust gets everywhere, in your house, your car, your lungs. But here's what makes Whyalla complicated. It has bones, real infrastructure, established services, a community that's been through economic hell and is still fighting. The local council is genuinely trying to diversify, investing in renewable energy projects, trying to attract new industries, marketing the lifestyle benefits of coastal living without coastal prices. There's a tight-knit community here, forged through shared struggle. The Maritime Museum is surprisingly good. The foreshore has been redeveloped. You can actually get decent coffee, which sounds trivial until you've lived in towns where instant is the only option. Whyalla works if you can create your own opportunity, if you're okay with economic uncertainty, and if you value affordability and space over career prospects. The cuttlefish migration is genuinely world-class. The sunsets over the Gulf are spectacular. You're 4 hours from Adelaide, which is both close enough to access and far enough to feel properly removed. Picture this. You're standing on the Whyalla foreshore at dusk, watching thousands of giant cuttlefish dance in the shallow water during breeding season. Behind you, the steelworks glows in the distance, a relic of prosperity that feels like a warning. The wind whips your hair. The sky turns impossible shades of orange and pink. A few locals fish off the jetty, their silhouettes dark against the fading light. You're in a city that's fighting for survival, offering you land so cheap it feels like pity. And part of you wonders, am I moving here or am I placing a bet on a town that might not exist in 20 years? And if Whyalla's industrial decline makes you uneasy, number 5 will show you what happens when isolation becomes the entire identity.
Number 5.
Broken Hill, New South Wales. Broken Hill is the outback's unlikely cultural capital, a mining town of 17,000 people sitting in the far west of New South Wales, closer to Adelaide than Sydney, that somehow became an art hub, a movie set, and a UNESCO heritage site, while still being brutally, unforgivingly remote. The City Council has rolled out land incentive schemes that target specific demographics: residential blocks at deeply discounted rates, business establishment grants, and relocation packages for healthcare workers and teachers. Some blocks go for under $20,000 in established areas, with even cheaper options on the outskirts. They're not just selling land, they're selling a lifestyle, a narrative that you can live affordably in a place with actual culture and history. The question is whether you can survive the climate long enough to enjoy it. Broken Hill exists because of mining. Silver, lead, zinc. The line of lode has been producing wealth since 1883, making millionaires and breaking bodies in equal measure. The mines still operate, which means jobs exist for the right skill sets, but the industry has contracted. What emerged in its place is unexpected. Broken Hill became an arts destination. Galleries dot the main street. Pro Hart, the famous outback artist, made this place synonymous with creativity born from desolation. Mad Max 2 was filmed here. The landscape, rust-red earth, sculptural rock formations, endless horizons, attracts photographers, painters, and tourists seeking authentic outback experience without dying. But let's talk about what living here actually means. The climate is savage. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees. The heat radiates off the ground in waves that distort reality. Dust storms roll through with apocalyptic regularity, turning the sky orange and coating everything in fine red powder that infiltrates sealed containers. Winter nights drop below freezing, which means you need heating and cooling systems, both running at capacity for months. Water is precious. The town relies on pipeline water from the Murray River hundreds of kilometers away, which makes every shower a reminder of vulnerability. The town itself has surprising infrastructure: a proper hospital, multiple schools, a TAFE campus, shopping centers, cafes that serve actual good coffee, and pubs. So many pubs, because mining culture demands places to drink away the dust and the heat. The community is a strange mix: multi-generational mining families, artists drawn by cheap rent and inspiration, retirees seeking affordable living, and transient workers passing through. The social scene revolves around the arts community, sports clubs, and the pub, where everyone eventually ends up because isolation breeds socializing. Employment outside mining is limited but not impossible. Tourism provides seasonal work. Healthcare and education always need people. Remote work is viable if you can handle satellite internet latency. The cost of living is low. Housing, food, utilities, all cheaper than capital cities. But everything else costs more because freight charges are brutal when you're 1,100 kilometers from Sydney. Picture this. You're standing at the living desert sculptures at sunset, watching the sky ignite in colors that don't look real. Behind you, 12 sandstone sculptures rise against the horizon, art created from the land itself. Below, Broken Hill spreads out like a rusty promise, smoke rising from the smelter in the distance. A galah lands on a nearby rock and screams at you, because even the birds here are confrontational. You're in a town that shouldn't work. Too hot, too remote, too economically fragile, and yet somehow, against all odds, it has soul. Whether that's enough to keep you here is another question entirely. And if Broken Hill's artistic soul can't distract you from the isolation, number 4 will strip away any romantic notions you have left.
Number 4. Kalgoorlie-Boulder, Western Australia. Welcome to the goldfields, where fortunes are still being dug from the earth and the phrase, living on the edge, takes on geological significance. Kalgoorlie-Boulder, or Cal as locals call it, sits 600 kilometers east of Perth in the heart of Western Australia's mining country. With about 30,000 residents, it's practically a metropolis compared to previous entries, but don't let the population fool you. This is still outback living with a mining town heartbeat. The local government has been offering land packages and housing incentives designed to attract families and skilled workers. Residential blocks from 50,000 to 100,000, which sounds expensive until you realize these are actual developed blocks with services connected in a town with genuine infrastructure. They want miners, yes, but also teachers, nurses, tradespeople, anyone willing to embrace the heat, the dust, and the unique culture of a place where gold literally built the streets. Kalgoorlie exists because in 1893, Paddy Hannon discovered gold here and triggered one of history's great gold rushes. That gold is still here. The Super Pit is one of Australia's largest open-cut mines, a massive wound in the earth visible from space, swallowing entire streets as it expands. Mining drives everything: the economy, The wages? The transient population of FIFO workers who fly in, make obscene money, and fly out. If you're a qualified tradesperson or have mining industry skills, you'll find work immediately at wages that make city salaries look insulting. But that prosperity comes with costs you don't see in the recruitment brochures. Let's discuss the environment, because it's relentless. Summer temperatures regularly hit 45+ degrees. The heat is dry, aggressive, the kind that makes you question whether humans should inhabit certain latitudes. Flies are omnipresent, not just annoying, but suffocating, covering any exposed skin like they're personally offended by your presence. Dust is a constant companion, coating cars, houses, lungs. The landscape is stark. Red earth, salt lakes, scrubby vegetation that looks perpetually sunburned. It's beautiful in that harsh, uncompromising way that defines the Australian interior. Wide skies, stunning sunsets, in the kind of silence that feels heavy. The town itself has real infrastructure. Hospitals, schools, a university campus, shopping centers, even a stock exchange, because this is serious mining country. There's culture too. Museums documenting gold rush history, galleries, festivals, and Hay Street, the historic red light district that's now a tourist attraction but still functions as a reminder of the town's rough-and-tumble heritage. The social scene revolves around pubs, sports clubs, and the peculiar camaraderie that develops in mining communities where everyone's here for the money and nobody pretends otherwise. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Kalgoorlie has problems. Substance abuse rates are high. Domestic violence statistics are concerning. The transient FIFO culture creates social instability. People come, make money, leave, and the community never quite solidifies. Indigenous disadvantage is visible and systemic. Crime rates sit above state averages. This isn't a judgment. It's the reality of a town built on boom and bust cycles, where prosperity and dysfunction coexist uncomfortably. Picture this. You're standing at the super pit lookout at dawn, watching the sun illuminate a hole so massive it swallows comprehension. 3.5 kilometers long, 1.5 kilometers wide, 600 meters deep. Trucks the size of houses crawl along spiral roads like insects. Below, Kalgoorlie spreads out in morning light, a town of wide streets designed for camel trains, historic buildings next to modern mine infrastructure, dust already rising as the heat builds. You're in a place where people come to get rich or get out, where comfort is negotiable but opportunity is real. The question isn't whether you can survive here, it's whether chasing gold, literal or metaphorical, is worth what this place demands from you. And if Kalgoorlie's mining wealth can't seduce you, number 3 will show you what happens when remoteness becomes almost spiritual.
Number 3. Coober, Pedy, South Australia. Coober Pedy isn't just remote, it's alien. This opal mining town of roughly 1,700 people sits 850 kilometers north of Adelaide, in the middle of the South Australian desert, and calling it a town feels generous. It's more like a collection of humans stubbornly refusing to acknowledge that this landscape was never meant to support life. The name comes from the Aboriginal term Quilpie, meaning white man's hole, which is darkly appropriate because most people here literally live underground to escape heat so extreme it borders on uninhabitable. The District Council of Coober Pedy offers land so cheap it's almost insulting. Residential blocks for $1,000 to $5,000, sometimes even free if you commit to developing within specific timeframes. They're not offering incentives, they're offering survival opportunities in a place that makes Mars colonization look reasonable. Let's establish what Coober Pedy is. It's the opal capital of the world, producing about 70% of the planet's precious opals. The entire economy revolves around mining. Either you're digging for opals, servicing miners, feeding miners, or selling tourists the fantasy of finding their own fortune. There are no rivers, no lakes, no natural water sources. Everything is trucked in or extracted from bore water that tastes faintly metallic and suspicious. The town center is a stretch of dusty road lined with mining equipment suppliers, a few cafes, tourist shops selling opals, and underground hotels carved into hillsides. There's a hospital, a school, and essential services, but calling this infrastructure robust would be wildly optimistic. The environment is biblical in its hostility. Summer temperatures exceed 50 degrees regularly, not hyperbole, actual recorded temperatures that make you understand why 60% of residents live in underground dugouts carved into soft sandstone. These aren't crude caves, they're legitimate homes with constant temperatures around 25 degrees year-round, no heating or cooling needed.
Above ground, the landscape looks post-apocalyptic. Mounds of tailings from opal mining dot the terrain like termite mounds, mullock heaps stretching to the horizon, rusted machinery abandoned where it broke down decades ago. Trees are nearly non-existent. The sky is relentlessly blue. Dust devils dance across the plain like desert spirits. It's starkly, brutally, undeniably beautiful in a way that makes you question your sanity for finding it so. The community is unlike anywhere else on Earth. It's genuinely multicultural. Over 45 nationalities live here, drawn by opal dreams and the promise that anyone can stake a claim and potentially strike it rich. Greeks, Serbs, Croatians, Italians, wave after wave of immigrants arrived chasing fortune. The social fabric is transient but tight. People look out for each other because out here, you have to. There's an underground Serbian Orthodox church carved entirely from rock, stained glass windows filtering light into stone chambers. It's surreal, breathtaking, and somehow perfectly Coober Pedy. Employment is simple: mining or mining-adjacent services. Tourism provides seasonal work. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was filmed here, and tourists still come seeking that apocalyptic aesthetic. Remote work is theoretically possible, if you can handle satellite internet that makes buffering an Olympic sport. The cost of living is weird. Land and housing are absurdly cheap, but everything else costs more because freight charges to the middle of nowhere are brutal. Picture this. You're standing on your underground porch. Yes, that's a thing. Watching the sun set over a landscape that looks like the moon. The temperature drops from unbearable to merely oppressive. In the distance, a mining blower echoes across the plain. Your neighbor, a Serbian immigrant who's been digging for opals for 30 years, waves and shouts something about finding color in his claim. Below your feet, entire streets of homes exist underground, carved from stone, cool and silent. You're living in a hole in the desert, chasing stones that might make you rich or keep you broke forever, in a town that shouldn't exist but refuses to die. It's either the most adventurous thing you'll ever do or the biggest mistake. Out here, those might be the same thing. And if Coober Pedy's underground existence feels extreme, number 2 will redefine what you think isolation actually means.
Number 2. Tennant Creek, Northern Territory. Tennant Creek is where Australia's outback stops being romantic and starts being a genuine test of human resilience. This town of roughly 3,000 people sits almost exactly halfway between Darwin and Alice Springs on the Stuart Highway, 1,000 kilometers from each, which means you're equidistant from 2 cities that are themselves considered remote. The Barkly Regional Council has launched land schemes so desperate they feel like social experiments. Free residential blocks, relocation grants, housing subsidies, and business incentive packages that essentially translate to, "Please, we're begging you, just consider living here." They'll give you land, they'll help you build, they'll throw money at you, because Tennant Creek is dying, slowly and visibly, and everyone knows it. Let's talk about what Tennant Creek actually is. It started as a gold mining town in the 1930s, boomed briefly, and has been declining ever since. The mines still operate, but employ a fraction of what they once did. What remains is a service town for surrounding cattle stations, a refueling stop for road trains hauling goods across the continent, and a community grappling with profound social dysfunction that nobody wants to discuss in tourism brochures. The main street has the essentials: supermarket, pub, roadhouse, mechanic. There's a hospital with limited capabilities, a school fighting to maintain enrollment, and infrastructure that feels like it's barely holding on. The economy runs on mining remnants, government services, and cattle industry support. If you're not in one of those sectors or working remotely, employment is nearly impossible. The environment is punishing. Summer temperatures soar past 45 degrees regularly, the kind of heat that makes you understand why early explorers died out here. The landscape is red dirt, spinifex grass, ghost gums, and nothing. Just endless, flat, unforgiving nothing stretching to every horizon. Dust storms turn the sky brown. The wet season, when it actually arrives, brings brief, violent storms that flood roads and then evaporate, leaving humidity that makes the heat even more oppressive. This is top-end desert country, where everything is designed to hurt you. Snakes, spiders, the sun itself feels personally aggressive. But here's what makes Tennant Creek genuinely difficult. The social issues are visible and unavoidable. Crime rates are significantly above national averages. Substance abuse is endemic. Poverty is structural and generational, particularly affecting the large indigenous population, who face systemic disadvantage that's been ignored for decades. Walking through town, you see boarded-up shops, public intoxication, teenagers with nothing to do and nowhere to go. This isn't judgment, it's observable reality. The community is fractured along racial and socioeconomic lines. Services are overwhelmed. There's a palpable sense that systems have failed and nobody knows how to fix them. Yet people do live here. Families, long-term residents who've chosen this life despite or because of its challenges. There's a certain freedom in remoteness this profound.
You're genuinely off the grid, where conventional rules feel optional. The night sky is extraordinary. The Devil's Marbles, spectacular granite boulders scattered across the landscape, sit just outside town like ancient sculptures. The surrounding country has a harsh beauty that grows on you if you survive long enough to appreciate it. Picture this. You're standing outside the Tennant Creek Memorial Club at sunset, beer in hand that tastes like necessity. The temperature has dropped from unbearable to merely oppressive. A road train roars past on the Stewart Highway, heading north or south, away, always away. In the distance, the mine's processing plant glows against darkening sky. A group of indigenous kids ride bikes in circles in an empty car park. You're in a town that feels forgotten, offering you free land because it's desperate for anyone who will stay. The question isn't whether you can survive here, it's whether surviving is the same as living, and whether that distinction even matters anymore when you're this far from everywhere else. And if Tennant Creek's social complexity makes you hesitate, number 1 will show you isolation so complete it borders on philosophical.
Number 1. Julia Creek, Queensland. We've arrived. The most remote, most desperate, most unhinged land offer in Australia right now. Julia Creek sits in northwest Queensland, roughly 1,400 kilometers from Brisbane and 600 kilometers inland from Townsville, distances that stop being measurements and start being existential concepts. This town of approximately 400 people exists in a landscape so flat, so empty, so utterly devoid of features that it feels like the planet forgot to finish rendering it. The McKinley Shire Council isn't just offering cheap land, they're offering free residential blocks, cash incentives up to $12,500 for building, business establishment grants, and essentially whatever else they can throw at you to convince someone, anyone, to move here and stay. This isn't a land deal. This is a desperate plea from a community watching itself evaporate in real time. Julia Creek exists because of cattle and mining, primarily phosphate. The town services surrounding cattle stations that span areas larger than European countries and hosts workers from nearby mines. The town center consists of a roadhouse, a pub, a general store, a tiny hospital with extremely limited services, and a school with declining enrollment. There's an airport with irregular flights to Townsville and Mount Isa. The population has been steadily declining for decades, young people leaving as soon as they're old enough, businesses closing, and what remains is a community stubbornly refusing to accept the inevitable. The environment is extreme. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees, the kind of heat where metal burns bare skin, where the air shimmers and distorts reality, where you genuinely question human habitability. The landscape is Mitchell grass plains stretching endlessly, punctuated by nothing except the occasional stunted tree and termite mounds. The wet season brings torrential flooding that cuts the town off completely. Roads become rivers, supplies can't get through, and you're genuinely isolated for weeks at a time. Then the dry season returns with dust storms that turn day into apocalyptic twilight. There are no mountains, no valleys, no geographic features whatsoever, just flat earth meeting flat sky in every direction. Employment is brutally limited. Cattle work, mine services, healthcare, education, or remote work if you can handle satellite internet that makes dial-up look fast. The social scene consists of the pub and community events that everyone attends because there's literally nothing else. The nearest city is Mount Isa, 150 kilometers away, which itself is remote. You're not just isolated, you're strategically abandoned by geography, economics, and modernity. But here's the thing that makes Julia Creek fascinating. The people who stay choose this. They're not trapped, they're committed. There's a certain purity to life this simplified. No traffic, no noise, no pretense. The stars at night are so bright they cast shadows. The silence is so complete you hear your own heartbeat. You're living at the absolute edge of viable human settlement, where community means everything because you literally have nothing else. Picture this. You're standing in your front yard at midnight, yard being generous for red dirt and sparse grass. There are no lights visible in any direction. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a cosmic river, so bright and dense it looks fake. A dingo howls somewhere in the darkness, answered by another kilometers away. The temperature has dropped to merely hot. You're holding land documents that cost you nothing because the council is so desperate they gave it away. You're 1,400 kilometers from Brisbane, 600 from the coast, living in a town of 400 people that's slowly dying despite everyone's best efforts. Your nearest neighbor is 2 kilometers away. The grocery store is a 300-kilometer round trip. Amazon Prime is a cruel joke. You have chosen, actively chosen, to build a life in a place that most people would consider uninhabitable. And as you stand there, alone under impossible stars, you realize something profound. You're either the bravest person you know or the most delusional.
Out here, in Julia Creek, under this endless sky, those might be exactly the same thing. So, there you have it. 10 Australian towns so desperate for residents they're practically paying you to prove humans can survive there. From Ceduna's coastal isolation to Julia Creek's existential emptiness, these aren't just land deals. They're invitations to test yourself against geography, climate, and your own tolerance for solitude that borders on spiritual. Free land sounds incredible until you're 3 hours from a hospital, battling flies that have formed a union, and realizing community means 12 people and a lot of cattle. But for some of you, the brave, the insane, the genuinely done with city life, these places might be exactly what you're looking for. Would you actually take free land in the middle of nowhere? Drop a comment, smash that like button, subscribe because we're diving into abandoned towns next week. And trust me, some stories are darker than just isolation. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and maybe reconsider that studio apartment rent. See you in the outback.